Welcome to this crash course on SaaS pricing. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Microsoft for hosting this Microsoft SaaS Academy. My name is Ulrich Schmidt. I'm a consultant. I used to be an entrepreneur. I've started and sold 3 businesses in the past, and all of them had pricing, and none of them very good pricing. So when I stopped being an entrepreneur and started being a business angel and an advisor, I decided to focus on pricing because I'd always felt that it was one of the major levers with which value could be unlocked and with which product market fit could be found. So fast forward 5 or 6 years, I'm collaborating with a lot of different tech ecosystems, Microsoft being one of them, SAP as well, Samsung as well, and a lot of global venture funds, Bessemer, Gradient, and so on. So that's a privilege. Also because it allows me to actually work with SaaS businesses at all life cycle stages. So from pre-revenue, we have technology we want to monetize, to legacy enterprise tech that already exists but maybe needs to be shifted to the cloud and have a new business model that is more as a service. So I want to spend the next 45 minutes or so giving you a sort of a quick run over of what I believe are the main items to look for when designing good pricing and packaging, because those two are integrated. The product and the pricing model need to fit together. That's sort of a central point. And then at the end, we'll be able to answer questions because this is a recording. We can have that. But at the end, I'll be there and answer your questions. So just note them down and we'll get to them. All right. So the first thing I noticed when I talked to new clients, and actually also as my experience as a founder back in the day, was that we're trying to answer this question. How do you price your product? And in order to answer it, we are gathering different data sources. We're gathering maybe users data from our product. We're interviewing our customers. We're gathering surveys. We are doing market research. We're looking at competitors. We're trying to build this platform or bundle of insight with which to then move on to answering this question. So how do we price our product? How much should it cost? How should it cost something? Is it per user? Is it per gigabyte? Is it flat fee? What do we do with discounts and how do we negotiate it? So on and so forth. And what I've come to notice is that there actually isn't a very strong correlation between how much data you gather and how well you're actually able to answer this question. So more data, more surveys, more interviews, more of all of that doesn't necessarily give businesses, and didn't give me in the past, this confidence to answer, oh, now I know how to price my product. And I thought about that for quite a while, and suddenly it occurred to me that it is because it's the wrong question. How to price your product is actually not the right way to approach the problem of finding a price. And this has sort of many reasons. One is that we get sort of hung up in all the, let's say, the pricing architecture possibilities that we have. We can do all of these sort of flat fees and recurring metrics and so on and so forth, and we can have starting costs, implementation fees, and professional services on the side as transactional fees, and we can even have exit fees and so on and so forth. And so this is the toolbox. But again, how to apply the toolbox, what metrics to choose, what flat fees to choose, if any, isn't necessarily easily answered just because we asked a lot of customers, or just because we tracked all their users' data, or just because we looked at competitors, and so on and so forth. Sometimes even I would argue that finding some of this data can actually lead you astray. It can actually lead you to worse pricing and worse packaging, especially if you're trying to copycat others. I've often heard, well, we're doing this pricing because that's what HubSpot is doing, or that's what Slack is doing, or that's what one of our competitors is doing. Sure. Is it right for you? Question mark? Maybe. But in order to sort of illustrate why I think how do we price our product is the wrong question, I want to take you through a metaphor. So please bear with me. Supposedly it's good, but let's start here. The metaphor is trains. So, as you all know, trains and enterprise software is almost the same thing, at least from a structural perspective. So, just like trains, enterprise software solves a huge problem. Just like trains, enterprise software needs a lot of investment to be built before you can solve that problem. So there is a lot of development cost, a lot of capital expenditure to put into the technology before we can actually bring it to market. So same with trains. So the original sort of big story around the commercialization of trains was first we made sort of shorter routes. First was in England between Manchester and Liverpool. Then quickly it arrived in the US where train lines were built up and down the east and west coast. But no train line actually went across from east to west, west to east, which was a problem because the US East Coast back in sort of mid 1850s, 60s or so, sort of Civil War times, were overpopulated. There were way too many people. And the federal government, especially after the Civil War, were trying to move people from the populated East Coast to the West Coast, where there was a lot of farmland that could be farmed, there were silver mines, and so on and so forth. So they were giving away land for free. The problem for everyone was that it took about 6 months to travel by foot or caravan or ponyback from Philadelphia or New York or wherever you were coming from to California, which was usually sort of the destination state. It also cost a lot of money. I think even back then, not even adjusted for inflation, it was sort of $6,000, which was pretty much everything that you had. So it was all of your money, took 6 years. And even to top it off, you had sort of a 10 to 20% risk of actually dying during the journey because of cold, because of typhus in the caravans, because of attacks from robbers and Indians and so on and so forth. So the prospect of a transcontinental railroad was really good. So we could build the railroad. We could actually transport passengers from, the first railroad went from Philadelphia to Sacramento in California. And we could do that in 6 days. And the cost price for producing sort of a train ticket in terms of the personnel and the coal and whatever else you needed was about $6. So suddenly you had a value proposition where we could cut the time to a fraction, we could cut the price to a fraction, and we could make it safer and better for everyone. So again, just like enterprise software. Enterprise software usually goes into some area of work or process and says, well, we can do this better. Either we can enable something that we weren't able to do before, or we can take a process and vastly improve it. The problem is, once you've built it and you need to price it, the price of transporting a passenger is almost zero. So maybe it cost $1 billion to build, or a lot of money at least, but the cost of producing the value for the single customer is close to zero, if not zero. Which leaves us in a conundrum on price, because what should a train ticket then cost? Zero obviously isn't the right price, but $1 maybe is the right price. Okay, we have a little bit of cost, $6, maybe it should cost 10, but so we'll still make a good margin if we charge 10, but we have a hard time figuring out how to actually account for all the development cost that we put into it. So usually when software companies go down this road, they try to do a lot of, let's say, accounting maneuvers in order to sort of figure out how do we actually sort of have a good ROI on our development cost or return on investment in terms of maybe our investors have expectations and so on and so forth. But underlying all of this is the problem that especially faces the sales force in the enterprise software department, which is almost any price is profitable. Regardless of what we sell this for, the sales force and sometimes also the founders will find that, well, if we just get the customer to say yes at any price, we will make money. And the more customers we get, because we have an almost unlimited supply of, let's say, seats in the software, we will make more and more money. So let's just get this train on the rails and get it moving. This is usually sort of balanced by an underlying intuition that founders and executives in SaaS businesses has, which is not all customers are actually willing to pay the same. Some are willing to pay more than others, and others are willing to pay less than some. So if we sort of look at the market, and I have an illustration here of a market for train tickets. One is rich, one is poor, and one is sort of in between. So we have sort of an underlying problem is knowing this, that there are different, let's say, segments or types of customers in the market that we're trying to serve with this new technology. How should we actually approach this? And how should we manage to charge different prices or price discriminate between our customers? So if you look at these sort of market personas in a little bit more sort of formal way, and you say, well, we can call one a first class, one a second class, and one a third class ticket candidate, and one wants to pay more, one less than the other. We see that if we're trying to approach this market with a mindset of what should a train ticket cost, essentially we're looking at the market as an optimization problem. We're looking at the market and saying, well, we could place the ticket price something around here in the middle, and then we are able to at least price this second class optimally, and we'll also get these sort of customers over here. And maybe that is the best single price that we could come up with for this product in this market, which is true. The problem, however, is that you have an invisible loss on the passengers, the customers that had wanted to pay more or were willing to pay more. And then you have a very visible loss on the passengers that don't want to pay what you're asking them. The problem with these two kinds of losses is that they don't sound similar. The third class passengers will let you know that you're too expensive, but the first class passengers will not let you know. What they will usually let you know is that your product isn't good enough yet. You're lacking all sorts of enterprisey features. They want you to invest more in development. So each of these types of customers in each end of your market are pushing you in different directions. First class wants you to invest more. Third class wants you to price less. So the dual direction is sort of hurting your margins, you can imagine. So the solution is to not price them the same thing. So we invent a ticket class system. We say, well, the first class passengers, they get a dining wagon and a sleeping wagon and a butler and all sorts of amenities and extra features in their product, and we then price them accordingly. The underlying technology is the same. They still ride on the train, they still go from A to B very quickly and efficiently and so on and so forth, but there are smaller things connected to what they do. Maybe in an enterprise software, we have single sign-ons, and we have added security, and we have better service level agreements, and we have all of the bells and whistles that are necessary to sell enterprise software. And of course, also, we need to sort of figure out what to do with this lower priced end of the market. So the question becomes, how do we create a third class experience, a version of the product that isn't as good as the others, but still has a market? So back in the original case, the Transcontinental Railroad case, this was actually a real problem for them. So the railroad tycoons had figured out that they wanted 3 ticket classes because they just stole the concept from the ocean liners, and they'd seen that in Europe. So that was already sort of standard. But what they found out was the customers, there were plenty of first class ticket customers. So that's fine. First class sold out. And then what happened was the third class sold out, the cheaper tickets, but second class didn't sell out because all the passengers thought, okay, I have 6 days on a train. It's not an opportunity for luxury or experience. I'll just wait until the next train and then buy one of these cheap third class tickets and then I'll spend my money in California once I get there. So the customers were frugal. They didn't want to pay as much. So to sort of figure out how to solve this problem, the railroad tycoons faced a similar problem that many enterprise software vendors or executives face today, which is how do we, with the features and the pricing models available to us, figure out a way to sort of force the right customers or incentivize the right customers to buy what we want them to and pay what we'd like them to. So they tried to, the railroad tycoons, remove the windows from the wagons, and they tried to stuff more people into these sort of third-class wagons to make them less and less attractive, but they couldn't really solve the problem. People just tried to sort of, it wasn't an opportunity for luxury. They just stored together in these wagons, didn't mind the windows, and so on and so forth. So the invention or innovation that they came up with in order to discriminate between these sort of third and second class passengers was as ingenious as it was brutal, which was they took the roofs off. So by taking the roof of the wagon for the third class passengers might not seem as a problem until you realize that the train, actually the railroad line, went over the Kentucky mountains, which means that it was freezing cold for about a day or two during this ride, which means again that about 10 to 20% of the passengers, much like the original journey, would actually die during the train ride. So they introduced the feature of death into the packaging again. And this actually made the second class sell out. And then the third class could also sell out. So, okay, maybe business standards and ethics are a bit better today. But I think the underlying intuition is the same. Everyone that wants to build a piece of enterprise software or a railroad across America wants to offer a first-class experience to their customers. Nobody builds the railroad to provide a third-class experience. But in order for the railroad to be a good commercial business that you build upon the technology, the rails, you need to figure out how to differentiate between your different customer groups in the market that you're serving. So, you shouldn't actually price your product. You shouldn't try to figure out what a ticket should cost. You should try and figure out what your customer should cost. So the takeaway is price your customer. Your product and the pricing model and everything else that we'll go over in this webinar simply are tools to do that.